I was just another face in the crowd, a nobody trying to make my way through a world that felt more mechanical than alive. The city where I lived, called Veracqua, was an ocean of metal and glass, its towering structures reaching for the skies. The streets buzzed with hover cars and automated drones, all moving in harmony like some kind of futuristic symphony. But for all its glimmering advancements, there was a loneliness in the air that even the brightest neon lights couldn't chase away. I had grown accustomed to it. The silence, the isolation. My name? Torin. Nothing special. Just another tech. Scavenger, picking up the scraps that the system left behind. Most people were too busy with their own lives to notice someone like me, and I preferred it that way. Until the day she showed up. It was late, as usual. The streets were quieter than they should have been, and the air had a crisp edge to it. The distant hum of air traffic was barely audible when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe an illusion created by one of the city's many holographic ads. But then I saw her again. She was standing under a street lamp, her figure slender and almost ethereal, the moonlight casting a silvery glow around her. She wasn't dressed in the typical garb of the city dwellers. No neon suits, no sharp lines, nothing that screamed of modernity. She wore a tattered cloak, which seemed out of place in a world that valued sleek perfection. Her skin shimmered in an otherworldly way, and her eyes were like nothing I had ever seen before. Two pools of liquid silver filled with something both ancient and unfamiliar. Her gaze locked onto mine as though she had been waiting for me. It was unsettling, but at the same time, there was a pull, an undeniable force that drew me toward her. I wasn't sure if it was the strange aura around her or something deeper, but I couldn't look away. "Are you lost?" I asked, my voice sounding far too loud in the otherwise empty street. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she studied me carefully, her eyes narrowing as if she was trying to read me, decode me in a way that felt unnerving. "Not lost," she finally whispered. Her voice was soft, melodic, like a song carried on the wind. "But starving." I felt a pang of pity in my chest. I had seen people in the streets who were hungry before, but there was something about her words, her presence, that struck me differently. I had nothing on me but some scraps from my last meal, but I couldn't just walk away. "You need help?" I asked, moving closer. She didn't flinch. In fact, she stepped toward me as though she knew exactly what I was going to do next. "I need sustenance," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I need to regain strength." "Come with me," I offered impulsively, though I knew it might be dangerous to take someone like her into my small, run-down apartment. But there was no question in my mind. Something told me I had to. It was as if fate itself was nudging me in her direction, a force I couldn't understand but had to obey. She didn't hesitate. "Thank you," she murmured, and I heard the weight of something deep in those words. I didn't know it then, but that simple phrase would come to haunt me in ways I couldn't imagine. As we walked through the silent streets of Veracqua, I couldn't help but glance at her from time to time. There was a grace to her, something regal that didn't belong here, something that told me she wasn't just another lost soul in this city of forgotten dreams. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than what she was showing me. We reached my apartment, a small, cluttered place in the lower levels of the city, far from the gleaming towers of the rich. It was humble, nothing special, but it was mine. I didn't expect her to notice the state of things, but her eyes swept over the room with a knowing glance. "Please," I said, gesturing toward the worn-out couch, "make yourself comfortable. I'll find something for you to eat." As I rummaged through my pantry, I couldn't help but think about her. She was unlike anyone I had ever met. There was something otherworldly about her, something that felt ancient, yet so out of place in this technological world. I finally found some basic food packs, Nothing fancy, but enough to get her by. I handed her the pack, and she accepted, it without a word. She tore into it like she hadn't eaten in days, and as I watched her, something odd crossed my mind. Her hunger was more than just physical. It was like she had been starved of something deeper, something beyond food. "What's your name?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. She paused for a moment, and then her lips parted slightly as if considering the weight of the question. "Mira," she said quietly, "but that is not the name I was born with." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with mystery. I didn't know why, but I felt as if I had just uncovered the first clue to a story that had yet to be told. A story I was about to become a part of, whether I liked it or not. I was just another face in the crowd, a nobody trying to make my way through a world that felt more mechanical than alive. The city where I lived, called Virakwa, was an ocean of metal and glass, its towering structures reaching for the skies. The streets buzzed with hovercars and automated drones, all moving in harmony like some kind of futuristic symphony. But for all its glimmering advancements, there was a loneliness in the air that even the brightest neon lights couldn't chase away. I had grown accustomed to it, the silence, the isolation. My name? Torin. Nothing special. Just another tech. Scavenger, picking up the scraps that the system left behind. Most people were too busy with their own lives to notice someone like me. And I preferred it that way. Until the day she showed up. It was late, as usual. The streets were quieter than they should have been, and the air had a crisp edge to it. The distant hum of air traffic was barely audible when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe an illusion created by one of the city's many holographic ads. But then I saw her again. She was standing under a street lamp, her figure slender and almost ethereal, the moonlight casting a silvery glow around her. She wasn't dressed in the typical garb of the city dwellers. No neon suits, no sharp lines, nothing that screamed of modernity. She wore a tattered cloak, which seemed out of place in a world that valued sleek perfection. Her skin shimmered in an otherworldly way, and her eyes were like nothing I had ever seen before. Two pools of liquid silver, filled with something both ancient and unfamiliar. Her gaze locked onto mine as though she had been waiting for me. It was unsettling, but at the same time there was a pull, an undeniable force that drew me toward her. I wasn't sure if it was the strange aura around her or something deeper, but I couldn't look away. "Are you lost?" I asked, my voice sounding far too loud in the otherwise empty street. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she studied me carefully, her eyes narrowing as if she was trying to read me, decode me in a way that felt unnerving. "Not lost," she finally whispered. Her voice was soft, melodic, like a song carried on the wind. "But starving." I felt a pang of pity in my chest. I had seen people in the streets who were hungry before, but there was something about her words, her presence, that struck me differently. I had nothing on me but some scraps from my last meal, but I couldn't just walk away. "You need help?" I asked, moving closer. She didn't flinch. In fact, she stepped toward me as though she knew exactly what I was going to do next. "I need sustenance," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I need to regain strength." "Come with me," I offered impulsively, though I knew it might be dangerous to take someone like her into my small, run-down apartment. But there was no question in my mind. Something told me I had to. It was as if fate itself was nudging me in her direction, a force I couldn't understand but had to obey. She didn't hesitate. "Thank you," she murmured, and I heard the weight of something deep in those words. I didn't know it then, but that simple phrase would come to haunt me in ways I couldn't imagine. As we walked through the silent streets of Virakwa, I couldn't help but glance at her from time to time. There was a grace to her, something Regal that didn't belong here, something that told me she wasn't just another lost soul in this city of forgotten dreams. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than what she was showing me. We reached my apartment, a small, cluttered place in the lower levels of the city, far from the gleaming towers of the rich. It was humble, nothing special, but it was mine. I didn't expect her to notice the state of things, but her eyes swept over the room with a knowing glance. "Please," I said, gesturing toward the worn-out couch. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll find something for you to eat." As I rummaged through my pantry, I couldn't help but think about her. She was unlike anyone I had ever met. There was something otherworldly about her, something that felt ancient, yet so out of place in this technological world. I finally found some basic food packs. Nothing fancy, but enough to get her by. I handed her the pack, and she accepted, it without a word. She tore into it like she hadn't eaten in days, and as I watched her, something odd crossed my mind. Her hunger was more than just physical. It was like she had been starved of something deeper, something beyond food. "What's your name?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. She paused for a moment, and then her lips parted slightly as if considering the weight of the question. "Mira," she said quietly. "But that is not the name I was born with." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with mystery. I didn't know why, but I felt as if I had just uncovered the first clue to a story that had yet to be told. A story I was about to become a part of, whether I liked it or not. The days following our decision to help Mira were filled with a sense of urgency, but also an unspoken understanding between us. We both knew we were about to walk into a storm, one that could tear apart everything we knew, but there was no turning back now. She had no choice but to reclaim what was hers, and I had no choice but to stand by her. We worked day and night, piecing together old tech, scavenging for anything that could help us make contact with Amara. It wasn't easy. Mira's knowledge of her homeworld was limited to what she could remember, fragments of a life she had left behind. The further we dug into her past, the more I realized just how much had been taken from her. And yet, there was a fire within, her that burned brighter than any of the obstacles we faced. One evening, as I was scanning through an old datapad, Mira came over to where I sat, her eyes distant as usual. But there was something different about the way she moved today, more purposeful, more certain. I looked up at her, sensing that something had shifted inside her. "Mira?" I asked, putting the datapad down. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her gaze lingering on the screen in front of me. "I've been thinking a lot," she said slowly, her voice heavy with a weight I hadn't heard before. "About everything, about what I left behind." I didn't speak at first. I knew she needed to get this off her chest. Mira had never shared much about her past beyond the bare essentials, and I could sense that she was about to open up in a way she hadn't before. "I was raised for a purpose, Torin," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was born to lead, to be the ruler of Amara. But when they saw the power within me, they didn't see someone who could change the world. They saw a threat." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I knew there was danger involved in her return, but I hadn't fully understood the depth of the betrayal she had faced. To be born into a legacy of power, only to be cast aside, was something beyond what most could endure. I couldn't imagine how that must have felt, how it must have shaped her. "Who did this to you?" I asked, my voice filled with a mix of anger and pity. "Your father? Your family?" Mira shook her head, her eyes flashing with something I hadn't seen before: rage. "My father was weak," she spat. "He was too focused on maintaining his power, too afraid of what I could become. And my mother?" She paused, her voice catching in her throat. "My mother never loved me. She saw me as a tool, something to be used. I was never her daughter, Torin. I was just a means to an end." I could see the raw pain in her eyes, and for the first time I felt the full weight of her past. Mira wasn't just some alien princess with a tragic backstory. She was someone who had been discarded, betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect her. And now she was fighting to reclaim everything that had been taken from her. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice soft. I didn't know what else to say. Words felt hollow in the face of what she had endured. She shook her head, a bitter smile crossing her lips. "It's not your fault, Torin. But I need to face them. I need to show them that I'm not weak, that I'm not the person they thought I was." I nodded, understanding the depth of her resolve. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for a future, for a chance to prove that she was worthy of her birthright. And I couldn't let her do it alone. I had made my choice, and no matter what happened, I was with her every step of the way. "I'm with you, Mira," I said, my voice firm. "We'll find a way. I'll help you take back what's yours." For the first time in a long while, Mira's expression softened. She reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder, and for a brief moment, there was a connection between us. One that went beyond words, beyond our differences. It was a moment of understanding, of shared purpose. "Thank you, Torin," she said, quietly. "I don't know what I would do without you." I didn't answer right away. There were too many thoughts swirling in my mind, too many questions about what we were getting ourselves into. But for once, I didn't feel afraid. We were in this together. And as much as I feared the dangers ahead, I knew that helping Mira was the right thing to do. The next day, we began preparations for our journey. We still didn't know how we were going to contact someone from Amara, but I was more determined than ever to help Mira. I could see the cracks in her walls, the way she had built herself into someone strong and capable, but I knew the truth. She wasn't just a queen in exile. She was a woman who had been forced to survive on her own, and now she was ready to reclaim her destiny. And as we set to work, I couldn't help but feel that this was more than just a mission. This was something that would change both of our lives forever. No matter what lay ahead, we were bound by something stronger than fate, a shared resolve to make things right. We spent the following days preparing for our journey with a sense of urgency. Every task, every choice, felt weighted with the knowledge that we were walking straight into the unknown. The idea of facing Mira's past, the world of Amara, was daunting, but it was the only option. We couldn't go back now. Not after everything we had learned, not after the promises we had made. The night before we were to leave, Mira was silent as we sat together, planning our route and talking strategy. We had gathered what little equipment we thought we might need, a few gadgets I had salvaged from the scrapyard, and some makeshift weapons. I could tell Mira wasn't concerned about the tools. She was focused on something much deeper. She was grappling with the ghosts of her past, the people, the betrayal, and the unimaginable challenge of returning to a place where she had once been royalty, only to be exiled like a criminal. "Do you think they'll recognize me?" she asked, her voice breaking the silence. She was staring out of the window, her gaze lost in the glowing lights of the city. "They'll remember you," I replied, my words measured. "But I don't know if they'll recognize the woman standing in front of them now. You've changed." Mira turned to face me, her eyes narrowing. "I haven't changed," she said, her tone sharp. "I'm the same person who was cast aside. I haven't forgotten what they did to me." "I know," I said quietly. "But you're different now. You've had to survive, and that's more than they ever expected." She didn't answer right away, but the look she gave me spoke volumes. There was a mix of gratitude and pain, the weight of a past that refused to stay buried. Mira had always been strong, but now I saw a different kind of strength in her, one forged in survival, in the harshest possible way. And it was clear to me that she wasn't just returning to Amara to reclaim her place. She was going back to take control, to prove that she was no longer the naive princess they had once feared. The next morning, we packed the last of our supplies and prepared to leave. I could feel the tension rising in the air. Both of us knew that we were walking straight into danger, but neither of us had any illusions about the stakes. Mira had nothing left to lose. As for me, I had made my choice, and there was no turning back. We left the apartment and headed into the streets of Virakwa. The city seemed different today. Its towering buildings, its flashing neon lights, everything seemed like a distant memory now. The closer we got to the old docks, where we would find the transport that would take us off-planet, the more surreal it all became. Everything I had known, everything I had spent years surviving, now felt insignificant. Mira was the one who mattered now. We arrived at the docks to find a ship waiting for us. Nothing special, just a small discreet freighter that would take us to the outskirts of the galaxy. From there, we would have to find a way to reach Amara. It wasn't the grand entrance Mira had once imagined, but it would do. For now, we had to remain undetected. Any sign of Amara's government or the people who had betrayed her would make our journey even harder. As we boarded the ship, the captain, a grizzled old man named Rokan, gave us a curt nod but said nothing. I could tell he had been briefed about our mission, and I could also tell that he wasn't particularly thrilled about it. But he was getting paid, and that was all that mattered. We were just another cargo shipment to him. The ship's engine roared to life, and soon, the skyline of Virakwa was nothing more than a distant memory. I sat in the cockpit with Mira, watching as the city shrank smaller and smaller in the distance. The weight of the situation settled in fully now. We were alone in the vastness of space, heading toward a world that could either offer us a future or bury us in its past. "Are you ready?" I asked, glancing at Mira. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned back in her seat, her eyes closed as if she were already miles away, lost in thought. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, almost eerily so. "I'm ready," she said. "I've always been ready. I just didn't know how much it would cost to get here." We traveled for what felt like days, the quiet hum of the ship serving as a constant reminder of the journey we were undertaking. As we passed through the outer rim of the galaxy, I couldn't help but wonder what awaited us on the other side. Would we find allies who still remembered her? Or would we be greeted by enemies who saw Mira as nothing more than a relic of the past? As we neared the coordinates Mira had given us, I could sense the unease between us. The ship was smaller than anything I'd ever been on, just a small transport vessel meant for inconspicuous travel. There were no luxuries, no comforts, just cold metallic walls and the constant hum of the engines. It was a stark contrast to the gilded halls of Amara that Mira had once known, and I could see it weighed on her. The woman who had once commanded armies and ruled over entire civilizations was now reduced to this, an exile, hiding in the shadows of space. "We're almost there," I said, trying to break the silence, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to her or myself. Mira's eyes opened, and she nodded, though her gaze remained distant. "The real journey begins when we reach Amara. That's where everything will change." I didn't ask her what she meant by that. I didn't have to. I knew that once we arrived, there would be no going back. Whatever happened next, whether we were accepted or rejected, it would alter the course of both our lives forever. The journey to Amara was long, and with each passing day, the weight of what we were doing pressed heavier on both of us. The further we traveled, the more Mira seemed to withdraw into herself. I couldn't blame her. Her whole life had been a lie. And now, after years of exile, she was returning to confront the very people who had betrayed her, to face a fate she hadn't asked for. The ship's artificial gravity hummed around us, a constant reminder of how far we were from home. As we approached the outer edge of Amara's star system, the vast, glowing planet loomed ahead, a swirling sphere of blue and green that looked peaceful from a distance. But I knew better. Peace had been long forgotten in this world. "We're almost there," I said, glancing over at Mira, who stood at the window, her eyes locked on the planet below. She hadn't said much in the past few hours, and the silence between us felt heavier than any words could convey. The fear in her eyes, though masked by determination, was unmistakable. "Yes," she replied softly, "and when we arrive, there will be no turning back." The ship dipped into the planet's atmosphere, and I could feel the vibrations through the hull as we passed through the clouds, descending toward the surface. Mira's grip tightened on the console, her knuckles white. I didn't say anything, knowing that words wouldn't ease her nerves. She was preparing for something far more significant than I could even understand. We landed at a remote port on the outskirts of Amara's capital. The docking bay was barren, devoid of the usual bustle you'd expect from a major spaceport. This place felt abandoned, untouched by the progress that Amara was so proud of. It was quiet, eerie almost, with only the sound of the wind sweeping across the barren landing strip. "We need to blend in," Mira said, breaking the silence. "We can't afford to be seen, not yet." I nodded. I had been to Amara before, but never like this. Never as an outsider. We both knew that Mira's return would set off alarms. Her presence alone was a threat to the establishment. She was the lost heir, the one who had been cast aside to be forgotten. But now she was here, and it was impossible to ignore her. We quickly exited the ship, moving into the shadows, careful to avoid drawing attention. Mira kept her head down, blending into the crowd. The streets were unlike anything I had seen on Earth. Clean, pristine, yet somehow lifeless. The city was magnificent in its own right, with towering buildings made of shimmering materials that reflected the sun's rays. The streets were wide and almost too orderly, with automated vehicles gliding by like silent predators. The architecture was breathtaking, but it felt like a place that had forgotten how to feel. Everything about this city screamed power, control, and a carefully maintained illusion of perfection. It was clear that Amara's rulers were obsessed with their image, their legacy. But what was the cost of such a pristine society? People like Mira, people who dared to challenge the established order, were pushed to the margins, forgotten, exiled. As we moved through the city, I could feel the tension building. The longer we stayed in the shadows, the more my unease grew. The people here weren't like the citizens of Virakwa. They walked with purpose, their faces blank, expressionless. There was no warmth, no sense of community, just cold indifference. And the fear that had been building in Mira's eyes only deepened with every step we took. Finally, we reached an old, rundown building at the edge of the city. It didn't fit the rest of Amara's aesthetic. There were no polished surfaces, no clean lines. This was a place that had been forgotten, a relic of the past. Mira's gaze lingered on it for a moment before she turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is it," she said. "The entrance to the underground network. This is where the resistance has been hiding, where those who still remember me are waiting." I could see the flicker of hope in her eyes, but it was tempered by the reality of the situation. The resistance wasn't just a group of rebels trying to fight a corrupt system. It was a group of people who had lost everything, who had been cast aside by their own society. They were desperate, and they were willing to fight for a chance, to bring down the rulers of Amara. We entered the building, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of the history that surrounded us. The walls were cracked and weathered, the floors worn down by years of neglect. But despite its decay, the building still held a sense of purpose. The resistance had made it their home, and they had used its structure to stay hidden from the eyes of the ruling class. Inside, we were greeted by a man who looked to be in his mid-40s. His eyes were sharp, calculating, but there was a weariness to him that spoke of years of struggle. He introduced himself as Kian, the leader of the resistance on Amara. "You made it," Kian said, his voice rough but steady. He extended his hand to Mira, but his gaze flickered to me before he added, "And I see you brought a friend." Mira nodded, but she didn't offer a handshake. "He's not just a friend, Kian. He's here to help." Kian studied me for a moment, his eyes scanning my face. Then, without saying another word, he led us deeper into the building. The air grew colder as we descended, and I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. This wasn't just a meeting place for rebels, it was the last stand of people who had nothing left but the fight in their hearts. Mira stopped just before we entered a large, dimly lit room where a group of resistance members were gathered. Her expression hardened, as if steeling herself for what was about to unfold. "I'm not here for revenge," Mira said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of a lifetime of pain. "I'm here to take back what's mine, and to free the people of Amara from the corruption that has poisoned this world." The resistance members stood in silence, their faces unreadable. But I could see it in their eyes. There was hope. Mira was more than just a symbol to them. She was their chance at redemption, at freedom. As we stepped into the room, I realized just how far we had come. The journey was far from over, and there was still so much that lay ahead. But for the first time, I truly believed that we could make a difference. Mira wasn't just a princess. She was a force of nature, and Amara was about to learn just how powerful that force could be. The moment we stepped into the heart of the resistance, I could feel the shift in the air. This wasn't just some underground movement. It was a rebellion, a gathering of people who had given everything to resist the system that had enslaved their world. Their eyes were sharp, full of suspicion, but also something else. Hope. The kind of hope that comes from knowing that change is not only possible, but inevitable, if you fight for it. Mira stood in the center of the room, the weight of her past resting heavy on her shoulders, but I could see a fire in her eyes, one that burned brighter than any of the cold stares that surrounded her. It wasn't the same fire I had seen in her before, the quiet, painful determination to survive. No, this was different. This was a fire born from a purpose that was now clear to her. Kian, the leader of the resistance, had introduced us to the group. There were only a few dozen rebels, scattered across the room, watching us with varying degrees of distrust. Their clothes were simple, worn, patched together, the attire of people who had lived through years of struggle. They weren't the kind of people I had expected to find here. Warriors, fighters, perhaps. But ordinary people who had been pushed into rebellion by a world that had forgotten them. "We have to move quickly," Kian said, his voice cutting through the silence. "The elite know we're here. The longer we stay, the more danger we're in. Mira, we've already lost contact with the outer sectors. The government is closing in." Mira nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Then we don't waste any more time." She turned to face the group, her voice rising with each word. "Amara has forgotten what it means to be free. Its people are suffocating under the weight of a system that cares nothing for them. And I'm here to remind them who they really are. I'm not just your queen. I'm your hope. We will take back what was stolen from us." The words rang through the room, and for the first time, the resistance members shifted, the tension in the room loosening. There was something magnetic about Mira, something that drew them in. She wasn't just talking about rebellion, she was talking about redemption. She was showing them that the future of their world didn't have to be a cycle of oppression and suffering. "We'll need allies," Kian said, breaking the momentary silence. "We can't take on the government alone. There are factions within the military that might support us, but we have to reach them before the government silences them." Mira turned to him, her eyes sharp. "Then we find them. We show them what the people of Amara can do when they stand together." I could see the growing resolve in her. She wasn't just a figurehead anymore. She had become the embodiment of the resistance itself. But even as the others rallied around her, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mira had never been to this underground world before. She had no idea who she could trust. And neither did I. "We need a plan," I said, stepping forward. Mira's gaze flickered to me, and I could see her eyes soften just for a moment. She wasn't used to taking advice. But she was different now. She had learned to rely on others, to trust that we could figure this out together. "Agreed," Mira said, her voice steady. "Kian, you have the network. We need to know where to strike." Kian's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't hesitate. "There's a military outpost in the eastern quadrant of the capital. If we take it, we can disrupt the communications, make it harder for the government to organize a counterattack. But it's heavily guarded. It'll be dangerous." "That's the point," Mira replied, her eyes never leaving his. "We have to show them that we're not afraid. If we can disrupt their communications, it will send a message to the people. It's time for Amara to rise." As we made our plans, I couldn't help but wonder if Mira fully understood the consequences of what she was proposing. Every move we made would either push us closer to victory or pull us deeper into the abyss. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, and yet the people around her, the resistance, saw her as their leader, their savior. It was a role she had never asked for, but one she had now stepped into fully. The next few hours were a blur of planning, strategy, and preparing for what was to come. Mira had become a leader, but even with all her strength, there was something fragile beneath the surface. I saw it in the moments when she stood still, lost in thought, staring at nothing. I saw it when she spoke, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying a deep, lingering fear. This wasn't just about returning to Amara to claim her birthright. This was about saving her world, and that was a weight that no one, not even a queen, could carry alone. As the rebels prepared to move out, I stayed close to Mira. I had been with her through every twist and turn. But now, as we stood on the precipice of war, I realized just how far we had come. She wasn't just a woman seeking revenge. She was a force of nature, and I was determined to stand by her as she fought for her people, and for herself. "We're ready," Kian said, his voice low but filled with determination. Mira gave a brief nod. "Then let's take back Amara." The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway as the resistance prepared to move out. Mira, the once exiled princess, now stood at the front, leading them into the unknown, into the heart of her world, where a battle for the future of Amara would begin. The world outside the Resistance's underground hideout was quiet, almost too quiet. As Mira led the group through the shadowed streets of Amara's capital, a palpable tension hung in the air, the kind that only came before a storm. I could feel it in my bones, the weight of everything we were about to face. The mission to disrupt the military communications was just the beginning. What lay ahead was far more dangerous, and I knew that we could lose everything in a heartbeat. Mira walked at the front of the group, her expression set, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a mix of caution and determination. She wasn't the same woman I had met on Earth. She was more, much more. She had become a queen, not just in name but in spirit. She carried the weight of Amara's future on her shoulders, and though I could see the burden in her gaze, there was a fire in her that refused to be extinguished. "Stay sharp," Kian whispered, his voice low as he moved alongside me. "We don't know how many are out there. The government's forces are everywhere, and they'll be looking for us." I nodded, keeping my eyes on Mira. There was a strange mix of awe and fear in the way the resistance members looked at her now. She wasn't just their leader, she was their symbol, and that symbol would either bring them victory or doom them, all. We moved quickly, keeping to the narrow alleyways and the shadowed corners of the city. The lights of the capital's towering buildings seemed to mock us, their brightness a stark contrast to the darkness that now enveloped us. But Mira didn't falter. She led the way with a quiet resolve, her focus unbroken. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. She knew what was at stake, and so did the rest of us. As we approached the military outpost, the tension in the group became almost unbearable. The buildings around us were cold and sterile, designed for function, not for humanity. The guards at the gates were few, but the security was tight. This wasn't going to be easy. "We need a diversion," Kian said, his voice barely audible. "We can't just walk in." "I'll handle it," Mira replied without hesitation, her voice steady. She turned to face us, her eyes piercing the group. "When the diversion happens, we move in fast. We take out the communications, and then we disappear before they can retaliate. This is the only chance we get." There was no hesitation in her words. No doubt, it was as if the plan was already set in motion in her mind. I could see the others looking at her with a mix of admiration and fear. They knew what was at stake. One wrong move, one slip-up, and it could all come crashing down. Mira didn't waste another second. She disappeared into the shadows, her form blending with the darkness as she moved toward the perimeter of the military outpost. The rest of us waited, hearts pounding in our chests, as the moment stretched on in tense silence. Then, without warning, the explosion rang out. A flash of light illuminated the night sky, followed by the deafening sound of metal twisting and crumpling. It was a signal. The diversion had worked. "Now!" Kian shouted, and we surged forward, moving quickly toward the gates. Mira was already ahead of us, her movements fluid, precise, as she infiltrated the compound with the same quiet intensity she had carried with her throughout this journey. The guards were disoriented by the blast, scrambling to regain control. But Mira moved with the speed and precision of a trained soldier, taking them out one by one, incapacitating them without hesitation. The resistance followed her lead, their weapons drawn, moving like shadows through the compound. We reached the communications hub at the heart of the base. The door was locked, but not for long. Kian made quick work of it, and we stormed inside. The room was filled with rows of consoles, each one connected to the rest of the planet's communication network. Mira moved swiftly to the main terminal, her fingers flying over the controls. "This is it," she said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Once I disable the system, they won't be able to contact the outer sectors. It'll give us a window to rally the people." I glanced at the others. The resistance members were watching Mira intently, their eyes wide with hope. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment they could strike back. Mira paused, for a moment, her fingers hovering over the final command. She turned to face me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had met back on Earth. She wasn't just a queen now. She was a warrior, a leader, who had earned her place. "I never wanted this, Torin," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now that it's here, I won't run from it. I'll take back Amara. For all of us." Before I could respond, she entered the final command, and the room filled with a loud, electric hum. The communications were down. The power had shifted, even if just for a moment. "Let's go," Kian urged. "We need to move before they send reinforcements." Mira nodded, and we quickly exited the room, retracing our steps through the compound. The chaos outside had intensified. The explosion had been a catalyst, setting off a chain reaction of confusion among the government forces. It wouldn't be long before they regrouped and retaliated. But for now, we had the upper hand. As we made our way back to the city's underbelly, I felt the weight of the moment. We had struck the first blow, but there was still so much to do. The battle for Amara was far from over. This was just the beginning. We reached the underground base once again, the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls. The resistance members were already preparing for the next phase of the plan, their faces determined, their resolve unbroken. Mira stood at the center, her back straight, her eyes focused on the horizon. She wasn't just a queen in exile anymore. She had become the symbol of rebellion, the spark that would ignite the fire of revolution across Amara. And as I stood beside her, I knew that we weren't just fighting for Amara's future. We were fighting for the future of everything we believed in: freedom, justice, and the chance to live without fear. "This is only the beginning," Mira said, her voice low but filled with conviction. "We will rise, and we will not stop until Amara is free."